Let me pray for us.
Let's pray for the study.
Father, we're grateful for how you provide this place for us. We thank you for Tom and his roommates and their hospitality toward us. It's been just incredible and wonderful. Feed us, our minds, our spirit, our body, with your word today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
If you, nobody's new here, right?
No.
Okay, that's right. So, hey, so maybe we should do brief introductions, just very quickly.
Sure.
A name and what do you do in Madison? So, I can start. So I'm Charles. I work for InterVarsity and also for Blackhawk Church as a teacher, pastor kind of role.
I'm Tom, and I'm a professor of counseling psychology in Milwaukee, and I enjoy hanging out with you guys in Madison.
Can I go to Crown Middle School?
Alright.
Hi. Yeah.
Alright, I'm Serena and I teach English at Nepal High School.
I'm Miriam and I study education policy at UW-Madison.
I'm John Dahl. I work with InterVarsity and I study grad students in faculty.
Maybe go back over here.
Interesting study.
Go ahead.
I'm Karen. I am a secondary student in biochemistry.
I'm Michael. I'm a graduate student in chemistry.
Hi, I'm Sung-Ho Yang. I study in graduate school. I study piano performance. No, about to graduate in May.
Oh, wow.
Very good.
Yay.
Yeah.
My name is Jaime. I work in a real estate title insurance company.
My name is Yong. I work in Xi'an, China. I'm now visiting Madison for a week.
I'm Steven. I teach in the chemistry department here at UW.
I'm James. I'm a third year undergraduate in geological engineering.
I'm Jennifer. I work for the Department of Health Services.
Right.
My name is Rachel. I'm in pharmaceutical sales and I'm also involved in international student ministry.
Come over here. We have a seat. You want seats for you. Tom is not that big. Right, Tom?
If you remember Rachel, if you want.
We got sofa right here.
They want you
Yeah.
to the sofa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
What?
Well, let me get us started. We are finishing up our series in Romans 1 through 8, which is this semester we try to do it in 6 weeks, which has worked well in some instances and not as well in others, just because that's really condensed time. Today is one of those more condensed ones, 2 talks in one. So there's plenty of food, plenty of drinks, coffee. But we're doing we're doing 7 and 8. And I think you guys are very into this passage. I feel bad about ending at 8 because Romans really is split into 2 pieces, is 1 through 11 and 12 to 16. The proper ending place is really 11. But there's just no way to do 1 through 11 in 6 weeks. That's just impossible. And 8 seems like a decent ending place. But I want to show you why it's not a perfect ending place for our time together. But okay, let me get started. Just kind of reminder of what we're doing here. We are spending most of our time in this room figuring out how the Christians in Rome in the first century would have understood the letter. So the goal is historical. The goal, what we call the exegetical reading, very much focused on the fact that Paul is a first century Jewish Pharisee, and he wrote in Greek, but in the mindset, in the worldview, in the structure related to the Hebrew Bible, and he was writing to a bunch of people who really know the Hebrew Bible very, very well. Remember, there was no New Testament at the time. Okay, so we're kind of rooting ourselves in that background, and that's what we're doing here. We should talk about what it means to us today, but those are really 2 separate questions. Okay, first what historical reading, and then what it means to us today. Okay. Reminder, the Christians of the first century, their Bible is a Septuagint. They're very familiar with the Septuagint, and they are always seeking to understand the connection between the Old Testament and the Jesus. There is no New Testament at the time. And I've already, I think I made this point before, one of the biggest thing that's going on in the New Testament is an attempt to connect Jesus to the Old Testament. That's, I think, one of the primary concerns in almost every book in the New Testament. There's some kind of an attempt to do this because they have a sacred text in front of them. And how does this connect to Jesus? Okay, that's got to be the driving question in their mind. So, the Church of Rome was
Charles, before you leave that,
Yeah.
and just ask you for a question which you can ignore.
okay.
You make a point of saying it's a Septuagint, the Greek version of the Hebrew Bible. Is
Yeah.
that significant? Or how is that significant in terms of just saying that they were just reading the Hebrew Bible, or just reading the Old Testament?
Right. The reason is because of some of the arguments I will make is that the arguments are made out of the Hebrew, the Septuagint rather than the Hebrew Bible. The connection is more direct than that. So previously I've introduced the idea of Lord being not just some kind of a master, but a reference to Yahweh, the Hebrew God, the God's personal name. Well, how did you get that out of that? Well, because Septuagint, they translate Yahweh into Kyrios, Lord. So they're reading the Septuagint. Whenever Paul uses phrases in Greek, it's going to have echo to the Septuagint. So that matters in that way only, really, just kind of the phrasing. For example, the word gospel. I've been making arguments out of the Septuagint rather than out of the Hebrew Bible. And also, including the passage on the Habakkuk quote, in which I did the same thing. It's like this is Masoretic text, Hebrew text, and this is the Septuagint text. But we're always kind of going after the Septuagint. Yeah. Okay. The Church of Rome, there's tension between Jews and Gentiles, and that will come to the much more fruition. What's actually been going on the whole time, Romans 1 through 8, we've been seeing this, both Jews and Gentiles in the same boat, that kind of discussion. And the ultimate payoff is actually 9 through 11. That's where this gets resolved. So we'll have to we won't get there really. Okay. Now, one of the ways I've been doing summary, last time I did a summary this way, and I thought it was actually helpful. Instead of summarizing the whole Romans, up to Romans 1 through 6, I posed it as the problem of God's righteousness. That, as you know, Paul is writing this letter to raise money for his support to Spain. And in so doing, he wants to, first of all, explain to the people of Rome, what's his gospel all about? Because I'm sure they heard about him. He has a reputation. And so he's probably trying to get rid of some, misunderstandings, misconceptions about his teaching. But he's also trying to alleviate some of the problems in Rome between the Jews and Gentiles. So he has multiple goals in this. And so I've kind of framed the discussion in terms of the problem of God's righteousness. God makes a creation, humans rebel against it. This is the classic Hebrew Bible story, right out of Genesis 1. And Paul assumes it. He assumes his audience all get this story. The world is under the power of sin, and the problem is, how does God manifest his righteousness? Okay? And what I mean by his righteousness, I don't mean that he is morally good. That's not what I mean. What I mean by that is God's commitment, his faithfulness to restore the world to its rightful state. So let's say God creates a world, it falls apart, and he leaves it, walks away from it. Does that make him morally unrighteous? Does it? I don't know. I mean, is there a moral issue about God and his responsibility to his creation? I don't know. It's hard to develop a moral ethical book of ethics and morals for deities. I don't know. I don't have one. Okay, I don't have one. But I would say that the righteousness of God in the Old Testament refers not about moral uprightness, but more about commitment. Okay, he is going to make things right. Things breaks, he makes it right. And we're talking about God's faithfulness. How do you bring the world to the rightful state? The Noah option is to destroy the world and purge it of all sinners. And so you have all these people who are humans who fully rebelled against God. You wipe them out. The world now is restored to a righteous state. It shows God's justice. It demonstrates his fairness in punishing all sinners. But it's considered a failure because humanity would be destroyed. There's no restoration of any sort. He created humans to rule the world, and by wiping the humans out, okay, what have you done? Nothing really, except what you destroyed your creation. The original plan is now marred irrevocably, right? And you can create more humans. I guess they can rebel again. It hasn't changed anything. Nothing's accomplished. We have the Jewish option, which is to punish Gentile idolaters and justify the Jews, vindicate them, get rid of everybody else. And the Jews are people who strongly identify with God's Torah. I mean, God picked the people and got them to create a nation and a culture, and these people know God. They worship the one true God. There's no doubt about that. And why not just elevate them? That would work. Well, it demonstrates God's faithfulness to his covenant with Israel. That is, he made a deal with Abraham. That's what he's going to do. He made a deal with Abraham. I'm going to use your people to bless the world. So, okay, all your descendants, we'll just vindicate them. That's one option, and it's faithful. But the problem is, since Jews are just as sinful and unfaithful, the solution does not solve the underlying problem of restoring the world. You would have elevated the people who are like everybody else. So what's the difference? What have you actually done? So in other words, God is kind of stuck, rock in a hard place. He can either be faithful to his sense of justice, or he can be faithful to his covenant with Israel, and it's hard to do both, right? So it's hard to do both. And what's really the two solutions points out the underlying problem is that there's no new world without a renewed humanity. What he really needs is a human that's changed, and then he can elevate them somehow. And then this group of people can be somehow connected to the Abrahamic covenant, and then we're all there. Right? If you think about God's solution, be faithful to Abraham. Okay, have create a people that's somehow connected to Abraham. At the same time, they need to be transformed, which obviously the Jewish option has not been accomplished. So transform these group of people connected to Abraham, and vindicate them, and now we have the best of both worlds. Okay, so and I mentioned that already. God must do something to renew humanity, to create a new race of people who have the Torah written on their hearts. The Torah cannot achieve this. How do we know this? Because the Jews have had it for generations and has not accomplished this renewal. And where we are in chapter 3 of Romans is the Jesus option. That those who believe in Jesus as God's Messiah encounter God via the new ark cover, the place of God's presence, and are reconciled to him through grace, accomplished via the faithfulness of Jesus. Their faith marks them off as people who will be vindicated in the final judgment. Okay. And so now we have a new group of people, empowered and transformed by Jesus. They will live out the laws of God, and this is in faithfulness to Abraham, because God's promise to Abraham was always about faith, and this is through Jesus, who comes out of Abraham's story. He's a Jewish Messiah. So we're going to maintain the Jewish character of this new group of people, but we're going to have something new that comes in to empower them and transform them. Okay, all with me so far. And so that kind of summary lays us out where we are in the argument. We had chapter 5, which Paul spent some time arguing that the Jesus option is in continuity with his covenant with Abraham. Because this is a major concern for him, not for us. We don't care. In our background, we're like, why is he spending so much time trying to prove that this is connected to Abraham? Because Paul is very concerned that God is faithful to his Abrahamic covenant. But we are New Testament people, so we don't have that same driving concern. So chapter 5 is really pounding that in. And then chapter 6, he's trying to answer the question, well, how does this actually work? I mean, how does the people created by the Jesus option actually do anything? So this is where we get that whole idea of people being transformed and changed via the dying to the kingdom of sin and alive to the kingdom of grace. Okay, so we have that option, and that's from last week. And today we're going to talk on chapter 7 and 8, and the 9 through 11 we're not going to talk about. But you can see that how it all fits together. First of all, well, what about the Torah? See, this question is still back here. You see that the major concern with faithfulness and continuity with the Hebrew Bible, with the Abrahamic covenant. We have this new thing. What about the old thing? Okay, so Torah. And then in chapter 8, how this Jesus option is really truly superior. Okay, truly superior, and still in continuity with it. Okay, this driving concern that we don't have makes it hard for us to read Romans. Okay, that's just like, Paul is really trying to answer a question that we don't have. And then 9 through 11, once again, this is why most studies of Romans stop at chapter 8, and we're doing it too. Shameful. But because this is a driving concern. And I when I taught 9 through 11 a few years back, I did a little first century evangelistic exercise. And I said, if you want to, in a first century world, preach the gospel of Jesus, how would you do it? Well, you would say something like, well, Jesus, well, yeah, you should believe in Jesus. He's the Jewish Messiah. They're like, oh, Jewish Messiah, cool. Do I have to become a Jew? Well, no. Okay, so the question moves on like that. But one of the big questions that have come up is this. So he's the Jewish Messiah. He's died and resurrected. Okay, that's kind of cool. So I presume all the Jews believe in him? And you're going to go, no. And that's a major apologetic problem that we, once again, don't have. Okay, so much of the letter of Romans is driven by these needs and urgencies of the time. This is a huge problem for the Christian church in the proclamation of the gospel. Why don't the Jews believe in this Jewish Messiah that you're proclaiming? Isn't that rather silly? Right? So, boom. Okay, but we're not going to touch that. We're going to talk about this chapter 7 and chapter 8. Yes.
I was wondering, like, in terms of like eschatology, the first two options being used are also kind of used, because it says in 11 that all Israel will be saved, and then in Noah there's some aspect of God's wrath.
Well, I think things come back, and so Romans 9 through 11 we will not be able to talk about, and what does all Israel mean in that passage is hugely under debate. And I taught a class, and we did 9 through 11 back in 2012. It's on video if you want. That's all I got. We're not doing it today. So, and we will, and I do go through all Israel. Okay. So, whoa.
Charles?
Yes.
It's important to sort of understand that this isn't somehow God making mistakes and doing improvements.
Oh, right. So I'm not saying plan A, plan B, plan C. I'm not saying that. But I do say they are. In fact, these options that I'm laying out are kind of, in my conceptual framework, ways in which God can solve his problem. And in a way, Paul's saying he's really rejecting those. He's saying these don't work. These can't work. And I would never say the Noah option is we went through the Old Testament with me. Noah was a salvation story, not a judgment story. So yeah, absolutely right. This is not plan A, plan B, plan C. God failed here, did something else. But that these Old Testament moves contribute to the overall understanding of what a kingdom. I think it gets us to the point where we say, we really need humans to be renewed. That's really the solution. And once we get there, now God actually does it. So.
I have questions, but I'll forego.
Okay.
Hard to believe, but I am.
Okay. So this is last week we did chapter 6. This was really nice, and we talked about the focus on death, resurrection, and baptism, and we spent some time talking about baptism in the Old Testament, and how. And what I said is baptism is symbolically an act of joining something, because you sink into the water. So Paul talks about you're baptized into Moses, okay? And Paul talks about you're baptized into Christ, and that baptism in the Old Testament has these echoes. Now, I put baptism in quotes in the Old Testament because there is no baptism in the Old Testament; it doesn't exist. But the understanding of going through water has symbolic meaning, and we talk about in creation, God conquers the forces of chaos to produce space for life. The flood, God destroys human sin to create moral space for human society. Exodus, God destroys the forces of oppression to bring freedom for his people. And in Joshua, God brings his people into the land of his promise, the first step in the creation of a new nation. And I would say a Christian baptism, baptizing into Christ, has all of these echoes in it. Baptism is a rather complex, multifaceted meaning, in which I don't think we understand enough of it in our churches. We need to really grab this. But
is Naaman's story part of the same set of metaphors?
So I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because, he's now, thanks to you, my favorite person in the Old
Yes.
Testament.
Yes.
Yep.
So in our Old Testament a story, we talk about Naaman as a tremendous turning point in the story of the Old Testament. Which, now, cleansing is connected to that. And I would say there's not judgment. I think it was more of a wash 7 times. It was the act of making Naaman wash in the water of the Jordan, and the Jordan is kind of gosh, that's ugly. It's gross, right? So now you start realizing what Naaman was objecting to. Like, there's much better rivers back where I'm from than here. So I would say it's an act of humility.
Can I just say the
Yeah.
Kim Kardashian's daughter got baptized in the Jordan, and she was very thrilled about it. Sorry, I don't know why I know this, but I do.
That's amazing.
Kim Kardashian and North, yeah, North and Northwest, yes, whatever, yes.
How do you know her name? Right, we got.
West, it was like.
Okay, all right. So let's. I'm not going to comment on that. Let's move on. The rest of chapter 6 gets us into the mechanism.
Excuse me, Charles. I was going to ask a question at this point. Can you? Thank you. So, prior to John the Baptist, are there other analogs of people leading messianic movements or something? Let's go to the Jordan and.
So we have no records of it.
We don't. So he's the first one that we know.
He might have. There might have been.
But we don't know.
We just don't know that, right? So
Okay.
the problem is,
The Maccabees.
did they baptize in the?
I wonder.
So that's a great
It's
question.
just that there's no. Hard to prove a negative, the non-existence of something, except to say that I have not, in reading about any of this, run across any references to. Everybody says we have cleansing rituals,
Yeah.
washing as cleansing,
Right.
but washing as a entrance into a community, baptizing into Christ, and all that it does. I think the earliest, we have John doing this, and we think that John's baptism is really related to this re-entry to the promised land because it's location.
If that's the case, then
Yeah.
John isn't just a simple dude running around in camel hair and eating honey and stuff. He seems like he's a real innovator and a really astute theologian in his own right.
There's a lot of people who are, there's not a lot, there's some people who made the argument that he is a teacher of righteousness spoken of in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Okay.
That he is connected with the Essenes. So he's a serious teacher and leader in his own right.
Right.
Once again, difficult to prove.
Yeah.
But people make that argument. In fact, I read a dissertation a few years back about arguing that why the Essenes disappeared. They just kind of left behind the caves, and their argument is that many of them that became Christians. That they were a significant part of the Jewish people who says, okay, we waited for actually arrived. This is it. They became Christians.
Right.
Once again, not enough historical evidence to prove any of that. But that was a Harvard dissertation that I was messing with. It's like, okay, cool thesis.
Yeah.
Who knows? Once again, we'll find out in heaven. In the eschaton, whether that's the case or not. That should be a really interesting, biblical seminar in the eschaton. I was right. You're wrong. See, Paul, you tell him. So that should be, biblical people would be like, oh,
I told you so in the eschaton.
yeah, we're so messed up. Instead of celebrating and love and all that stuff, we'd be like, see, what was that? Come on. Okay. Millennialism. Premillennialism. What the heck? Okay. So, all right, move on. So, the two big ideas: baptizing into something, baptizing into Christ, leads to all these things. And then the other idea is that by baptizing into Christ, we die to the kingdom of sin. Okay. So this is a cute. I'm reviewing this a little bit from last time, is because this is a critical idea, that by entering into Christ, when He died, we died with Him, and when He rose again, we rose with Him. And that's kind of a foundational, pictorial idea that you need to have in your head, because chapters 6, 7, 8, they all flow out of this argument. 7 and 8 all flow right into this. Okay. So this is kind of the central point. So. And so, anyway, questions on this. Let's just kind of have this picture in your head. Kind of like two realms, and then a connecting path was created by the death and resurrection of Jesus. Okay, and we actually had that the other time. Like, we had some bizarre metaphors last time we talked about. Like, Jesus, you're in this place, you're a slave, you're being tortured, and Jesus comes in, He dies, and then you hide in His body, and it gets shipped out. Okay, we're metaphors going on like that, but that's the idea. Yes.
It's sort of a Charles Yu version of the bridge diagram. Is what it looks like.
Yeah, does it really? Yikes.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Well, so that's actually my question. Is this a picture that we could use in terms of drawing it on a napkin for our friends in terms of explaining the gospel?
Well, the problem is that it requires a bunch of it requires a lot of explanation, because this is not intuitive. The bridge is intuitive, and so is a lot of other evangelistic tools. This begins with concepts like kingdom of sin and kingdom of grace. You're like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
It assumes, first of all, that this world is under the power and with almost like a personal agency power of sin. That sin has ability to rule. and that we actually are slaves and belongs in here. This is all the presuppositions it makes about the world are very much contrary to our current presuppositions. So when I teach first century, we're talking about this is first century reading, we're not doing much contextualization, and this is not easily contextualized to us. So yeah, in fact, we'll have to do a lot of explanation just to be able to bring this out and say, okay. So that's my reaction.
When you got hired by InterVarsity, you remember one of your first tasks was to come up with a new bridge diagram for grad students and for faculty, and I think that remains undone.
I thought I came up with like I thought I came up with a fourth spiritual law. I thought I came up with the one sentence thing. God's in the process of rebuilding this world. Do you want to be part of it?
I do remember that.
Yeah. This kind of like God's that was my one stab at the very, very short invitation, which obviously when you reduce things you lose tons of stuff.
Right.
But I thought that was trying to capture the heart of the kingdom of God.
I like that. I just need to dress it up in the right kind of marketing.
And then you need pictures, yeah. And need some video to show how you use circles and stuff. That's right. Anyway, so let's get to today. Yikes. So. A little reminder from last time, chapter 7, 1 through 6. And he's getting you back to the idea of dying to this old world and being raised to the new world. And he says, this is requirement. Okay, death is required. If you're a slave to somebody, how do you leave that servitude? Well, the only way to do it is to die. So he says, do you not know, brethren, for I'm speaking to those who know the law, the Torah, that the Torah is binding on a person only during his life. Thus, a married woman is bound by law to her husband as long as he lives. But if her husband dies, she is discharged from the Torah concerning the husband. Accordingly, she'll be called an adulteress if she lives with another man while her husband is alive. But if her husband dies, she is free from that Torah, and if she marries another man, she is not an adulteress. Likewise, my brethren, you have died to the Torah through the body of Christ, so that you may belong to another, to him who has been raised from the dead, in order that you may bear fruit for God. Okay. Now, I said that this metaphor is a little messed up, as you can, right? The original metaphor is you have a husband, you have the wife, and you have another husband. If they're both alive, then she's committing adultery. If one of them dies, you feel free to marry another person. In this situation, we're the one who died. Okay? So which is a little weird. So the metaphor is a little messed up, but the underlying principle still applies, which is death revokes previous existing relationships. It's simple as that. So if you die to the old system of Torah, that allows you to create a new relationship with Christ. That's the underlying principle at work here. If you push the comparison too far, the analogy actually falls apart. Okay, so, but I think that's the principle he's getting at. Okay, but there's a couple of sentences here that really sets us up for chapter 7 and 8, and we need to look at that. One is right at the beginning: while we're living in the flesh, our sinful passions aroused by the Torah. Like, whoa. Okay. Now, Paul's made some comments about the Torah before, about its functions, but now it's saying the Torah actually aroused sinful passions. You got to explain that, right? You got to say something about that. We're at work in our members to bear fruit for death. Okay. But now we are discharged from the Torah, dead to that which held us captive, so that we serve not under the old written code, but in the new life of the Spirit. So now you see really old way of Torah and the new life of the Spirit, the two phases. So chapter 7 is the old phase. Chapter 8 is the new phase. Right? I think this verse really lays out programmatically in the next two chapters the two things we're going to see, which answers the question that people always have about chapter 7, which is this about Christians?
Right.
And the answer is, no way. It just can't be. But that's the one we're discharged from. That's the one we died to. That's the whole point. Right? We've been talking about death to the Torah and new life in the Spirit. So before we even get to it, okay, it can't possibly be that we're talking about a Christian life. Does that make sense? Because I'm saying that because most of you are fairly familiar with chapter 7, and I'm sure you're very familiar with sermons on chapter 7 that talk about, I want to do what I don't want to do, I don't do what I want to do, and it's like, this Christian struggle. And I'm positing that, and many scholars are in agreement with me, that chapter 7 has nothing to do with the Christian existence. He's trying to answer a different question, which is, what about the Torah? All right, what about the Torah? So let's get to it. Okay, maybe you can see. So what then should we say? That the Torah is sin? Back it up. How do we get there? Right there. Right? Well, while we were living in the flesh, our sinful passions are aroused by the Torah. Whoa.
Yeah, what in the world?
Yeah, exactly. What in the world, right? So is Torah sin then? But this has to be about the Mosaic Code, from which we are being discharged. Okay, I'm overemphasizing this point because I'm trying to clear some path, clear some ground, because we have such an ingrained understanding of chapter 7. So I'm kind of like, okay, let's get us out of it. So the question really is more of a discussion of the current Jewish situation, which we've been dealing with since chapter 2. Right? The current Jews, they're under the situation, they're under the weight, under the charge, right? So what should we say? That Torah is sin? This, Meganatoi. By no means. Like Paul's like, the heck with that. No way. Yet, if it had not been for the Torah, I should not have known sin. Right? Let me just read it through and I'll comment on it. I should not have known what it is to covet if the Torah had not said you shall not covet. But sin, finding an opportunity in the commandment, wrought in me all kinds of covetousness. Apart from the Torah, sin lies dead. I was once alive apart from the Torah, but when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. The very commandment which promised life proved to be death to me. For sin, finding opportunity in the commandment, deceived me, and by it killed me. So the Torah is holy, and the commandment is holy, just, and good. Okay, so a couple of things that Paul is saying about Torah. First of all, Torah is not sin. It has positive functions. One of them being giving us knowledge of what sin is. And remember back in the earlier part of Romans what Paul said, before coming of the Torah, death reigned. Okay, but the sin was not reckoned as sin. It was just not counted, even though people were dying. The death of everyone tells you that sin was running the show, but nobody really knew what sin was. And here the commandment comes, oh yeah, okay. And now a lot of people want to say, well, this law here is more about, some kind of a principle or conscience. It cannot be. Because what does the Torah tell you? You shall not covet. Where is that from? Ten Commandments. He's talking about the Mosaic Torah. Okay, the reference is unmistakable. This has to be the Mosaic Torah, given on Mount Sinai, right? The coming of the Torah to the Israelites, and we are not under it. Okay. So now, here's the thing, though. Without Torah, we don't know what is sinful, what is not. So this Torah has a function, but the problem is sin operates on the Torah. So that's the second part. But by finding opportunity, but once we find out what it is that we should not do, we want to do it. So Paul's outlining something about human nature, about what it means to be a sinful creature. Is that for God, and this is something I always amazed about God, that I'm like, when God sees something that is good and that is right, he's excited and wants to do it. For humans, flawed humans that we are, our initial reaction is to do something that is evil. I mean, that's evil. Oh, I'm attracted to it. The more forbidden it is, the more attractive it is. That's something about us. Okay, and so that's what Paul's getting at. He says that's not the Torah's fault. That's our own fault. That's actually not even our own fault. That's sin's fault. Right? It's interesting. Okay, this is where the devil made me do it. A concept is showing up here. But the idea that if we're slaves to sin, we're in the sinful realm, sin can take what is right and good and take advantage of it and make us sin all the more. Now we have this concept here. Let me stop. Any questions so far? Yes.
Just to make sure I'm following you.
Yeah.
So we've got sin as kind of a personified ruler of the world,
yes.
The world system.
Through Abraham, through Moses, through Adam. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But kind of ruling in the background. Sort of, it's an unknown enemy. The law comes along. Now the enemy is revealed for what it is.
Yes.
And the enemy's response is,
you sin more.
All right, here we go. Now you know me.
Right.
Now we can act. It's almost like
Sauron
sending little orc raiders.
Okay.
for a while, and then like, hey, it's Sauron. He's like, all right, here we go.
Right. So you know who I am now, and guess what? That
It's all-
knowledge.
it's all Lord of the Rings.
You know who I am now, and that knowledge is detrimental to you. Okay. You would think that revealing myself, really revealing the darkness, revealing the sin, would be helpful, would help people to reject him. But what it does is it actually shows the depravity of humanity. That once we see its darkness, we embrace it all the more. Actually, that's coming up in the next passage, and I will get to that. Okay, John.
Charles, it seems like Paul is getting into the psychology of human persons.
Yeah.
Are we committed to his take on psychology?
You mean this particular point?
Yeah, exactly. Because are we bound by this?
You mean currently?
Yeah. We're not bound by their understanding of science and laws of planetary motion. Should we be bound by it? I'm asking somewhat provocatively. I understand.
Right. Well, let me clarify a little bit.
Yeah.
He is talking about a situation under Torah. So he would be, I think he would be the first to say, this no longer exists. Okay? The point of living life in the Spirit is that we're not drawn. That our initial reaction to what is evil is more revulsion rather than, ooh, that sounds like fun. That's the whole idea.
But
Okay.
then would his comments apply for someone who's not a Christian?
Even then, that's tricky because he's talking about the Jews.
Right.
He's talking about people who live under the Torah. So this is a very narrow subset. He's not saying something. But okay. Let me back up. This one is talking about the Torah, yes, but he's drawing from a larger understanding, which is if you're shown a rule, you want to break it. Right? And your question is that true for all humanity? And I would say by experience, it's, I don't know, what do you guys think? In your own experience and people around you?
Depends on the rule.
Depends on the rule. Yeah, I suppose.
Stay away from the broccoli. Okay, I'm good with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, stay away from the fruit of knowledge, good and evil. And this is right out of Genesis 1. And what's interesting about this is, the phrase, the sin deceived me. Right? And I think there's definitely Mosaic Torah here, obviously, 10 Commandments. But I think there's an echo here to Genesis 3 and to Adam and Eve's story on here.
Can I ask a more pointed question?
Yeah.
Do you know of other analogs in Second Temple Judaism in which there would be a Paul having a shared understanding with a wider rabbinic?
Oh, that's a good question. Gosh.
Understanding of human psychology and so on.
I don't know that. Sorry.
Okay.
I mean, they have the two voices thing. Have you heard about that?
No.
Oh yeah. It's a kind of a demon angel understanding, the voice of goodness, and they have that you're torn back and forth idea. Okay, so that's a great question, and I should have pulled that in. I don't know why I didn't. Okay, that's because you just reminded me of it. But the rabbinic, the Second Temple Judaism, that there is the idea of a person as being kind of two voices constantly, two natures pulling on them back and forth. Okay, which I think Paul is drawing from in chapter 7. That this is the Jewish understanding of the person. And then Paul's like, that sucks. That's a horrible existence.
Yeah.
Thanks be to God, we are out of that one. Okay. And what's ironic about that is we take that and say, that's not the Christian existence.
Right.
And I think that's. Let me just kind of go off slightly and say that the gospel we preach has a huge impact on the Christian life we live. And if we preach a gospel that says, now that you're a Christian, you will struggle back and forth constantly, that's how we live our lives out, because we think that's the norm. If we preach a gospel that says, you know what, you've been freed from this. You when you're not going to be perfect, but you've been freed from this. That's the whole reason Jesus died on the cross, is for you to be freed from the slavery to sin. That changes things. I think that changes Christian behavior.
That's really awesome.
Anyway, sorry, I don't have the answer. I should have put that in, actually. I should have found the text for it. But that's a great idea, actually. Yes.
This may be sort of slightly tangential, but
Yeah.
I mean, are we sort of, for a lot of us in academia, we all Well, as a post-colonialist, I'm happy to sort of say knowledge is power and knowledge is dangerous and may have been the root cause of so much violence and repression. So in that sense, I mean, I'm very happy with sort of taking this anti-enlightenment stand of, you know, I know, therefore I can change. I mean, that has been, that's the scientific paradigm, right? So is that what I mean, when you first talked about it, that's what, that's the lens through which I'm rethinking this. Right. Is that what this is, or is it?
So first of all, knowledge is not bad here, right? Knowledge is not cast as bad. In fact, Paul is not saying this is a bad thing. That he's actually saying no, it's not sin at all. Knowledge is good. I should know this, but knowledge that is, and this is the same story out of Genesis 3, which is if knowledge is combined with a depraved human nature, knowledge is dangerous, because knowledge itself is ambiguous, because it depends on what you do with it. So I mean, people talk about scientific knowledge all the time. The same power that you can use to generate, electricity can be used to blow up cities, right? So knowledge itself can be put to multiple uses. So that's kind of what's happening here. You have this knowledge given by God, that God wants us to have, right? Don't covet, do not kill. This is the moral standard. Oh, and sin comes along and says, hey, guess what I can do with this one? Okay, and.
So are we saying that self-awareness by itself does not lead to transformation?
Precisely. And chapter 8 is not a revocation of the knowledge. It is now the fulfillment of the Torah. The Torah was merely an aspect of it. The knowledge is important. You need to know the standard. But then knowing it not only makes you it doesn't help you achieve it, perversely makes you less likely to achieve it. Whereas the transformation comes along and says, empowered by God, now you can live out this Torah, right? From the very get-go of Romans, we've been talking about people who are not circumcised, but live out the Torah, who have the Torah written on their hearts. We're going to get a group of people who can do this, okay? But it is not merely by having the knowledge itself. That itself is insufficient. Okay? So necessary but not sufficient conditions. No. So it's not end-type knowledge in this case.
So, Charles, I already mentioned I need to leave shortly, but one of the things that this is begging for is like, what do we do as a community in order to help each other see that kind of transformation work out in our lives? Because these seminars are fabulous in terms of coming to a great understanding, but the seminars by themselves don't bring transformation.
No, I agree.
Yeah. So what? So
this is going a little meta here. I think pedagogically, if we redo these seminars, we'll need to redo them in terms of follow-up small groups or something much more pedagogically, something more that does get people involved and engaged in community and accountability and those kind of things. Yeah. So I think that would be something we have to redo, and actually something I'm thinking about. Yeah. But yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Charles.
See you, John. All right. Okay. Now, people might have the question about, if we move on a little bit, sin lying dead. Apart from the Torah, sin lies dead, or sin is dead. And that's problematic, because back in Romans 6, Romans 5, we have the sin being present from Adam, right? And this is talking about, apart from the Torah, before the Torah came to Moses, sin lies dead. Well, how could that be, right? So I think we're not talking about sin not existing before the Torah, but sin, a discussion of the sin's vitality. That sin sin's kind of inert. It's there, people die, but there's a sense of inertness of sin until the Torah shows up, and then it becomes more powerful than ever. Okay, so that I think is the idea here. Now I know this is confusing because Paul is using first person all over the place here, but I think, once again, I think we get it. The I here is a hypothetical Jewish person living under the Torah. Okay, go ahead.
Is the reign of death different from the reign of sin?
No, they're the same thing, one and the same. I think Paul would say sin and death. Death capitalized, personified, it's sin. Death is really the mark that sin runs the world. The fact that people keep dying tells you that sin is running the world.
I guess it was just from that apart from the law, sin lies dead. So it's like another ruler coming when the law comes.
Oh no, yeah, no. Yeah, the problem here is that lies there, the verb doesn't really exist there. It's just sin is death. Sin is inert, sin is dead, yeah. So, okay. So, any questions on this passage? So originally, Torah is holy, commandment is holy, just and good. If you read the Hebrew Bible, if you read Exodus through Deuteronomy, good stuff. Holy and just. It reflects God's character. You're not supposed to hate it. You're not supposed to go, oh, this is horrible. This is good stuff. Now, which is good stuff? Bring death to me. Right? That's the question. Like, it's good. Did it kill me? Well, no. No. That's not well, no. Actually, completely not. That didn't kill me. It was sin working death in me through what is good. So what is good can be turned and leveraged into killing me. In order that sin might be shown to be sin. What? This is really interesting comment here. It's working death in me through what is good in order that sin might be shown to be sin. What the? Okay. And through the commandment might become sinful beyond measure. Okay. So here we're getting at something, what I was getting at earlier, which is sin, the mighty warrior, the emperor, he rules the world. But people kind of don't know his existence, or kind of like, it's inert. The Torah comes, reveals sin for what it is. Suddenly the sin is now revealed as sin. Okay. And then, guess what? The coming of the Torah actually reveals the full extent of the power of sin. Because by showing you what sin is, and then you go ahead and go, oh, I want to do some more of it. Okay. By revealing you what this horrible darkness you live in, and you go, yes, I will do more. Well, not yes, I'll do more, but like, I can't help but do more. Okay. That shows you how powerful sin is. So sin is revealed to be sin, and that becomes beyond measure. You see this full extent, the corruption. Okay. And you admire it in some way, like, wow, we're really messed up. Because knowing it is sinful, and I still want to do it, tells me how powerful this thing is, and I'm totally, utterly helpless in the face of slavery to sin. Does that make sense? Okay. So,
is sin then personified the drive to make things wrong, to do wrong things?
Okay, so the problem with personified is assuming that underlying a sin is not actually, it has no agency. I think Paul in New Testament has the assumption that there is agency involved. There's some kind of a person who has the power.
A force beyond.
A force beyond us. That's powerful. And that this force beyond is actually trying to what enslaves us. We're a slave to it. And what Paul's getting at is, yeah, you know what? The Torah comes and shows you what sin is, and then because your reaction to it is even more sin, it actually shows sin even more clearly than before. So it's another good part about the Torah. The fact that Torah makes you sin more, it's actually good. Because it reveals sin even further. It makes its corrosive power more clear. Like, oh, it's truly disgusting. So what the reaction we have then is a moral revulsion at sin and also at our own reaction to it. Right? Because you notice, Paul's saying this hypothetical person that he's speaking in this persona, this person does not like sin. He is not celebrating the fact that he conforms to it. Right, he sees it now. So before the Torah comes, he wouldn't know he's in this situation. Now that Torah comes, he knows he's in a cage and he can't get out. He sees the prison that he's in. Okay? So we know the Torah is spiritual. I am carnal, sold under sin. I've been sold. So I do not understand my own actions. I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree that the Torah is good. The Torah is a good thing. I know it's right. But I don't want to do what I'm doing. So I'm actually aligned with the Torah in terms of my moral standards. But being aligned with it does me no good. Having the same view of the Torah does me no good because I keep doing it. And now I am more revulsed than ever, and I am shocked by how powerful this thing is. Okay. No longer I do it, but sin which dwells in me. If I know that nothing good dwells within me, that is, in my flesh, I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. But I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. There's a little... Okay. Now, if I do what I do not want, it is no longer that I that do it, but sin which dwells within me. And all of a sudden we have a he's creating this very strange view, this engagement of the sin that's acting in my body, and then the I that is now separated out from it, that's aligned with God. Okay? Which is a very interesting a view of kind of human mind, human anthropology. So the I becomes innocent in some ways. This is where people really get the devil made me do it idea. Okay, okay, but it's not entirely. It's okay. I make fun of it, but he really wants to emphasize that the Torah is able to help this innocent I come into existence. Okay. Previously, not knowing the Torah, we kind of have this. We just kind of live out this life. It's confused, whatever. By having this Torah, the Torah comes and shows what sin is. First of all, ooh, I like the Torah. So this person now aligns himself with the Torah. Second, oh, even though I've seen the Torah, I still do everything the Torah tells me not to do. Okay, I'm in prison. I'm enslaved. And then, now I really hate my actions, but I can't help myself. So the I now, an innocent I is created in this process, and we're becoming alienated from our own actions, from our own bodily desires, and not bodily desires, but the desires that we actually have, and that we're living under. There's a bit of the internal conflict arises out of this. Okay, any questions? Yes.
So like disengagement from like identifying with sin, and
Yeah.
then later on you actually get freed from it.
Yeah. You have to create this disengagement before you can be freed from it. That's what's amazing about it. There needs to be a freedom from the slavery, but you need to have a consciousness that I don't like what's happening. I don't like my life. I don't like the things that I'm doing in my life. I disagree with it.
Charles, all
Yes.
this sounds very psychologized.
I know, isn't it?
Does not sound very Jewish at all.
Well, I'm not sure if it's Jewish or not.
I mean,
Yeah.
the Torah is very material. Everything has been about materiality and
Yes.
practice and
Yes.
the body and
Yes.
temporality. But this is very weird.
Yes, it is. It is very very much psychological. He's getting at this I, and then the body. So he's and the thing is, I would say okay, the Torah, yes, but I would say the Second Temple Judaism, Second Temple period Jewish writing moves toward this, and New Testament is very much within the Second Temple period of Jewish writing. So we need to think a little bit more about what I was talking about earlier, the description of the two voices, of the good nature and the evil nature, and their conflict. That's in Second Temple writing. So it's developing that way. I think at some point you start writing and describing the internal realities of human existence, our experienced life. And there is that push and pull and tug. And the Paul is very much using here. But you're right, this sounds different from the Old Testament. Yeah, there's definitely a shift. Yeah, definitely a shift.
And is that the reason why, is it the Corinthian church? They had issues with people separating
Body and mind.
Yeah.
Yeah,
body and
absolutely.
mind.
Yeah. So we're in the Greek age, right? I mean, they're writing in Greek. You got the spirit body dualistic ideas kind of just pervasive all around. Now Paul's gonna obviously reject that and embrace the body, but for him, he is going to say, yeah, there's body, and then there is my spirit, which is eternal soul. So he's going to have those kind of disjunctions, even though the Old Testament never really makes that clear. So that disjunction is not strong in the Old Testament, becomes more powerful in the New Testament. Right. But you get to a point where Jesus can say things like, do not fear those who can kill the body, but fear those who can kill the body and the spirit. I go, okay. Right. So humans as being at least bipartite. I don't know about people who do tripartite, body, soul, spirit. I don't know. But okay. But at least dualistic assumptions are showing up here. So.
How would I say it in a way that's more relational rather than somehow inherent and essential spirit, body, etc.?
Yeah.
I mean, could I actually say that there is a part of me that recognizes my deep, abiding relationship with God, and to that extent, I belong to the kingdom of grace, even if there's the rest of me that still is enslaved.
Okay. So back up. This is not kingdom of grace.
Right. Okay.
Right. So Paul is going to say this struggle is shouldn't be happening in the Christian's life.
Yeah, that's the issue. Isn't
So we're
it?
going to get there. We have to get there. So we're all kind of we're kind of falling back into this is our current existence thing. And I'm saying no. He's trying to describe the problem of the Torah. The Torah is not able to vindicate you. Why not? Because that is not its original purpose. Its original purpose is to show you sin, and then to show the tremendous power of sin, and to show you that you're imprisoned in sin. You can't get out. That's the point of. That's what it means to be under Torah. Okay, and like, oh, I get what's right and wrong now, and guess what? That doesn't help me. That doesn't help me one bit. Okay, I still want to do it. Knowing right and wrong doesn't help me. In fact, it makes things worse. And that making things worse actually showed me how sin even further. So, anyway. Questions? Let's move on. We'll take a break after this slide. So find it to be a Torah. This is really interesting here. Well, first of all, we need to change that translation. This is RSV. So I find it to be a law. Greek is just eurisko araton nomon. I find the law, or I find out about the law. So one translation is, this is what I discovered about the Torah. It's probably a better translation. He's not talking about the principle. He's saying, here's what I found out about the Torah, which is, when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand, for I delight in the Torah of God, in my inmost self. See, he's still doing that inmost self, but I see in my members another Torah. What the heck? Like, this is where people want to stop talking about Torah. They want to talk about other things. They want to translate the word law in different ways. You know, and let me read all the way through. You can see all these Torahs running around. I see in my members another nomos at war with the nomos of my mind, and making me captive to the nomos of sin, which dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then I myself serve the nomos of God with my mind, but with my flesh I serve the nomos of sin. It's like, what's going on here? Okay, so now we have the word nomos just running wild. Okay. Now, one thing you can try to do is you can say, okay, now this is where we give up on translating the word nomos as Torah and move on. Except the problem is, all the way through this, nomos has been talking about the Torah. It's clear, right? We're talking about the Torah of Moses. So let's see if Paul is taking us interesting places with this idea, and if we stick with it for a little bit, and see if it becomes coherent. Okay. So, this is what I found out about the Torah. I'll just stay with Torah. The 5 books of Moses. Okay, just think about that. I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the Torah of God. We get that. I delight in these 5 books and the principles and outlines, and it's in my inmost self. But I see in my members, he's talking about his body really, another Torah at war with the Torah of my mind. Okay. What the heck is that? What the heck is that? He's really kind of he's saying there's really multiple types of Torah. Remember when we back in chapter 4, he talked about the Torah of faith and the Torah of works. And I asked you guys, if you read Genesis through Deuteronomy, and I ask you, if you read it all the way through, do you get the sense that faith is what this is about, or do you get the sense that you should just follow the rules? Okay, those are that's two ways of reading the Torah. Okay, here he's talking about 2 other dimensions of the Torah. One dimension is the Torah that when you read it, you go, oh wow, I see God's holiness, I see God's goodness. That's the Torah of God that reveals God's character, and in my inmost self, I delight in it. That same Torah book, the Torah, that's where the Torah in my mind is also in my members, becomes a Torah of sin. Reading that same book makes me want to sin. Okay, so now we're looking at another 2 dimensions way of reading the same thing. One that I delight in because God is holy. One that says, oh, and should I covet? Oh, rats! I'm gonna start coveting now. That's so. This is so. Pushing this a little further, you have Torah in the mind, Torah of God. Then you have the other one, the Torah of sin, which dwells in the body. Two different ways of reacting to the same Torah. Okay. Questions on that?
Is that an explanation that comes just from trying to make sense of this passage? Because it really seems like there are a whole bunch of different Torahs here, not just a bunch of different responses to the same Torah.
Right. So the problem we're stuck with here is that Paul's using this word again and again, repeating itself. What is he talking about? Right? If you want to talk about, I delight in the Torah of God. Well, I think we're clear on that one. I see in my members another Torah. Another? That's your problem right there. I see in my member a principle. No. That doesn't quite work. Like, what would this principle be? Right? So you're stuck with trying to find a good translation here. And what I think what I end up with is, it's another Torah. There's another Torah that's like fighting with the Torah in my mind. So he's actually in some way personifying the Torahs. Okay, we got two Torahs fighting. One reveals God in my innermost mind. It reveals who God is. And another one in my body that's making me sin.
So
it's the same Torah.
Why does he use the word Torah?
Because he's been using it like crazy all throughout the book. So we started with Genesis 2. The question is, what advantage do the Jews have? They have the Torah. All right. So this has been the question, and so why the focus on Torah is, how is God faithful to the Abrahamic covenant? Okay, Jesus is revelation revealed apart from the Torah, yet predicted by the Torah and the prophets. So Paul has been thoroughly focused on explaining how Torah and Jesus fit together. Okay, so I would think this is part of it. This is what he's really getting at. Even though Torah is something that's been eclipsed, it served an important function. Okay. But I think he should go ahead.
So why not use Torah when you're talking about the law of God, and use law when you're talking about some other kind of law that is not the Torah?
Well, I would say it's the same thing. It's the same Torah. Mm-hmm. Because the Torah gets used for sin. I mean, he just explained in the previous passage here, right? Torah didn't bring me death, but sin through the Torah kills me. Right? So that is he's trying to absolve Torah of any responsibility. But what he wants to do is he still want to use that concept, and he kind of basically takes that idea and kind of shrinks it down to the Torah of sin. It is a Torah that causes me to sin. It is a Torah that kills me, Torah of death. It's a Torah that kills me, causes me to sin, and kills me. And at the same time, it is a Torah of God. And they're just the different parts in my head, in my person. One's my inmost self, one's in my body.
So whatever we sort of it as a diagnosis, that's what it is, isn't it? Torah as a sort of a diagnosis of, so it's still good because it's from God, but in my body it's working death because the diagnosis is that I'm dying.
A little bit more than that. It also causes you to die. Well, not causes you to die, but your body's interaction with it causes you to die. Because your body seeing the Torah makes you want to sin more. Right, that was the other point.
Okay, so when you talk about dying, you're talking about very spiritual?
So the very commandment which promised life proved to be death to me.
Okay, so...
Yeah. Obviously, we're all going to die already. So this is where this death is kind of his idea seems to be that increased sin and death are related things. So if you want to say, okay, you're going to die anyway, I would say, yeah, but your life is now, if your life becomes more sinful, your life is more deathly, more characterized by death. Okay. Yes.
Is it like the spiritual death, or is it more like the curses, all the curses in the book of the Torah, the end of Deuteronomy, when he says, all this stuff will happen to you.
Oh, right. Yeah. So we're not. I don't think we're in the Deuteronomy's part here. And like I said, you want to call it spiritual death? I'm just thinking a life that is marked heavily by sin is a life that is dead, that is heavily marked by the power of death. Okay. I think that's what he's getting at. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna die. I should die, because we're all gonna. This person's gonna die regardless. But it's just your life becomes much more marked by death and the power of death. So we have this. He's talking about this. It's supposed to bring me life. It kills me, and then this killing, this increase of death creates this space in which this innocent I show up and exist. And now he's really summarizing all of this. The so is kind of the summarizing. So if we read this in light of the previous verses, we have this Torah of God that's good, that's in my inmost mind, and then we have this Torah that kills me in my members. And I'm just kind of stuck. Okay, I am stuck. I can't get out of this trap of seeing what is good and then seeing what is good make things worse. Any questions?
So even sins of the even sins of the mind are being caused by the members.
Or being pushed off to the body, which is why I think he uses the idea of the inmost self. I'm not sure how much he wants to say it's my fingers causing me to sin, which is just kind of silly. I don't think he's trying to do that. But he is trying to say something like, there is a part that's detached from all these sinful desires. And that part is like, I know this is good. And I delight in the Torah of God. And then there's all these other parts which I think he would call maybe instincts or maybe desires or drives that are lower down and that I'm stuck in. I can't get out of. And I don't want to go psychology here, but I think, I think that's kind of what he's playing with here, is that we're driven by a lot of drives which Paul is pushing into the members of the body. Okay, but I think we're talking about something else.
Yeah, I was just trying to parse out this idea of how, what is influence to actually want to sin. I'm trying to work out, is it kind of like defeatist? Well, yes, I'm going to sin anyway now that I know what sin is, because it's being explained to me by the Torah, so I may as well just get on with it. Or is it more like I'm not tempted to because I can articulate what the sins are?
Yeah, so this is where, this is interesting. I should have known what is to covet if Allah has said you should not covet. But finding opportunity will mean all kinds of covetousness, right? So, so you're getting at, one is knowing what the law is and then feeling like you feel it. So I'm not sure a defeatist attitude would be something that's an automatic response. I think if a person who reads the Torah and believes in God, the first response would be, I should not covet. And then finds that suddenly he becomes aware of this and he's coveting more than ever. And that, at least that's Paul's experience. And he's like, rats. How did that happen? If I didn't know about this, I wouldn't have been aware of it. I wouldn't have thought about it. Maybe I was coveting as much as before. I don't know. But suddenly I'm now super aware of the fact that I'm doing it, and the fact that I seem to be doing it more than ever. So it's not. I wouldn't say the initial response is defeatist, but I think the ending response is definitely defeatist. The ending response is curse the man that I am. Right? It's like, wretched man that I am. Who will deliver me from this body? How am I going to get out of this thing? This is a horrible existence. Another reason why to say this is not the Christian life. Because he wouldn't say, as a Christian, wretched man that I am. And that's like, that doesn't make any sense. Go ahead.
The choice of you shall not covet, the Josh and Milty seminar that you shall not covet was the inward transformation, or the other ones were more outward.
Yes.
External, so that's any significance to the choice?
Well, it's a great part, because this is the one that Paul can pull out, and very few people can deny. That they I think people, if he says thou shalt not murder, I shall murder everybody. That makes no sense, right? It's like, no, I haven't killed anybody, so I don't know what you're talking about, Paul. But I think the 10th one has always been the tricky one. The 10th one has always been the first. Okay, love your God, have no other God before me. I don't go worship idols, so Jews can get away with that. Even though I think what we mean by that today is there's other kinds of idols out there, but do not use the Lord's name in vain. Okay, I never say the word Yahweh. Never comes out. I keep those 1 through 9. There are ways for the Jewish people to keep it. He's hitting at the 10th one, which they can't. right? They can't. That's always been the problem. So for Paul, this is the easy one. So he says, you know what? There it is, and I can't stop myself. Yeah.
It seems like an odd choice because saying don't covet makes you want to covet more.
Yeah.
I mean, no.
No? Okay.
No, I mean, there are other reasons to covet, but
Yes,
just because
yeah.
someone told you not to, it's not pleasant to be coveting something.
Yeah, yeah. That's
I
it.
think it's more like, I mean, I may be doing something and not knowing that I
Yeah.
was coveting something. Suddenly, that other thing has personality enough to be coveted. I mean, I recognize it as other, which I may
Yeah.
not have done to begin
Right.
with. So in that sense,
But you
I
don't covet it
get
more
that.
because someone said stop coveting that, Miriam.
but because I might just have been unconsciously doing things and saying that this is mine. I'm really cool with wanting your bike. Because it might be mine. You know, it actually is mine. I mean, and then she said, well, no, you know, the bike has a relationship to Jenny, and all of a sudden I am coveting, and I can't seem to stop myself. But now I know that I am. I might be wrong. But can I say, Charles,
Well, here's, let me just
you're
respond.
getting...
Let me just respond really quickly, Jennifer. Just which is, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we have to agree with Paul on his assessment of covetousness
Right.
to get his underlying point about the failure of the Torah and what the Torah actually what it not failure, wrong choice of word. What it succeeds in doing and what it cannot do. I think that's what he's getting at.
Charles,
Last comment before break.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is all of this just to say that this Torah in itself is not salvational?
Yes.
And therefore we need
Christ.
Christ.
Exactly. He's been hinting at this the whole way through, right?
Right.
The Torah cannot justify. The Torah cannot vindicate. We started from chapter 2. Jews, you don't live better lives. You have Torah. It makes no difference. So Paul's been repeating this theme, and he's finally come to a chapter. He says, okay, I'm going to explain to you exactly why it is that Torah doesn't. This is what its actual function is. It does not have that other function. And the other actual function comes through Jesus. And we see that already in 5 and in 6, and it's going to come full-blown in chapter 8.
And I know you said that was the last comment, but is it okay to say that...
I almost had a great ending with it. It was almost perfect. Okay, go
I
ahead.
know.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
this whole mind-body disjunction,
Yeah.
does one have to agree? I mean, surely there's other materials in the Bible itself that don't seem to give truth to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. The Old Testament definitely had less of that. The Old Testament, the human body is psychosomatic unity. I mean, the problem is that you see the word soul translated like crazy. The underlying word is nephesh, which refers to vitality or appetite. So there was really no sense of this division. The New Testament, it becomes harder to deny. Jesus talks about it, Paul talks about it. The idea of the psuhe, the soul, the pneuma, and then you have the body. The flesh is not really about the body. Flesh is about the corrupted humanity. So it's just this is the air they breathe in the first century Greco-Hellenistic world. And it's repetitive Greco-Hellenistic, but it's Hellenistic world, and it's the language and the vocab of anthropology that they use. And so the question you were kind of asking about hermeneutically, when we look at scripture, we argue that the scripture teaches certain things and those things are true. It assumes certain things and those things are not necessarily true. Okay, and is Paul assuming this duality or is he teaching this duality? And that is a great question that I am not going to answer today because that's a hard one. Okay, it's hard one. It's actually especially relevant today. This is one of the big questions going on in churches and theology places. It's the mind-body problem. Does a personhood reside in the body entirely? Is there a soul? And that's the question that's actually showing up in the UW, all the academic major universities. Are we monistic? Are we just is the mind really an emergent property that it comes out of the body? And that when the body ceases to exist, the mind ceases to exist. There is no eternal soul. And these are being prompted by advances in our understanding of the brain and in neuropsychology. All kinds of experiments are showing really interesting results, which has all kinds of theological implications. That's a good question. and I don't think the question is answered yet. Okay, which is is the Bible teaching it, or is the Bible assuming it? And that may not be something that's easy to answer. All right, 5 minute break, guys.
Oh, Charlie, you done?